all. I just sent off files for proof printings of the card game that I'm doing with Rachel Haywire called Election Party. It's kind of like, we call it a game for charismatic sociopaths, where you play presidential or electoral hopefuls assigned some crazy policies that you have to try and argue for and scandals that you have to try and deal with, and then win votes from your other players, your other friends who are playing. It's basically an improvisational party game of making fun of politics of every strand. So hopefully, since we're both in the kind of election seasons now, that will be something big. It's kind of outside of my comfort zone in terms of the sheer scale and the design of the project and everything. But yeah, that's off for test printing, so I can't really do anything with that at the moment, which leaves me free to pursue other things and maybe make a couple of videos. So today I'm going to review Jolt, or Jolt, however you choose to pronounce it. In the ancient tongue, it means the use of unnecessary apostrophes. And this is a book by Venger Satanis. So, full disclosure, Venger's a friend. I count him as a friend. We do a podcast together, Inappropriate Characters. Go and subscribe to that on YouTube. And he's another kind of controversial figure in the role-playing scene, somewhat inappropriately, I feel, because he is a total sweetheart, really, and soft as anything. Pretty much wouldn't say boo to a goose. He just seems to get into trouble with a sort of wide-eyed innocence that I personally find quite charming. But so let's review this. This isn't my normal review setup, by the way. I used to have a blanket over a box near to my bookcase where I could wedge the webcam in and get a nice downward point of view. I've had the box got brittle from heaters being next to it and started breaking when I moved it, and since it's full of comics, I had to leave it where it is. So this is a different setup. The sound should be a better quality here, since I don't have to shout to be heard because the microphone's nice and close now. The lighting's incredibly difficult to sort out here, so yeah, new setup, let me know if it works. Right, Jolt. This is a book that is almost impossible to review in any conventional kind of sense, as will become clear as we start going through it. But I will do my best. Now, the first thing that struck me when I got it, I did get the copy free, I don't know if I mentioned that. The first thing I noticed when I got it was that it really hit me with a wave of nostalgia for old art books. My dad was always a big fan, is a big fan of science fiction, particularly art as well, the artistic side. He bought tons of great illustrated fantasy books, which I used to pore over with great intensity. Books by Tim White, Chris Akios, Masters of Fantasy Art, but books like that, the old Paper Tiger Publications stuff. So immediately seeing this with its loose cover and its nice foil cover interior, though Venger, you should have gone for purple for the cloth, really. You really should have. That immediately sort of took me back to those old art books and photo plate reference books from my childhood. So I did get a nice hit of nostalgia from it, though there is one thing missing. It doesn't have that smell that the art books used to, that kind of mix of vinegar and hot plastic. There is a smell, but it's not that one. So that's the only thing that's missing. Right then, let's crack this open and get on with it. So yeah, there's a limited number. This is 144 of 2000. Venger has many copies stacked up in his home. If you've seen photos that James Raggi has posted when he's had stock in his flat and so on, it can really dominate your house or use up room in your garage. So I would say, if anything that I say here sounds appealing, I would go and snag a copy while you can, because I don't know how long they're going to last, for one thing. And for another, I think Venger needs help getting his wife off his back and getting the books out of his house. Now, you have a very nice detailed contents, which is nice to see. I tend to skimp on indexing and contents a bit. I leave the contents very general when I index things. It's more complete, but I don't generally bother unless a book goes over 100 pages, which I know drives people crazy, and I never bookmark my PDFs. You can do that yourself, you lazy cunts. But he's got plenty here, so it should be relatively easy to find whatever you need. And he's certainly spent a lot of money, and you can see on the proper proofreading. God, that cuts into your money. Got other people to do the layout and stuff I all do myself, pretty much. Me, computer programs, and a couple of tolerant friends. It was kickstarted. We did talk about it getting out to backers on the last Inappropriate Characters, so it should be on the way if you backed it. He's having to pack and post all himself, so it is slow. It's the one thing he hasn't outsourced, but they should be on the way soon. So don't worry about that. Like, there's lots here. Possibly too much. Possibly you should have just done a more general contents and stuck with the index, Venger. In fact, your contents is bigger than your index. Alright, so it's partly to do with font, but never mind. There's backgrounds on all the pages, which, generally speaking, I find quite obnoxious, but not in this case, because it's nice and faded, nice and light. It's still very readable against that background, so that's not so much of a problem. And the margins don't cut into the text too far, which is another thing that bugs me. There's so much wasted space in a lot of books. You want your money's worth. The main thing about Jolt is the Black Pyramid, and he goes into that. So the Black Pyramid is like the goal. It's kind of the central feature of the whole thing. But Jolt is surrounded by desert and weirdness and so on. Now, Venger wears a lot of his influences on his sleeve a lot of the time, and I think they'll be obvious to you as we go through this. He takes whatever memes are around or controversies that are around and puts them into his games. I tend to react to them, he tends to put them in. I use references and I beg, borrow and steal ideas from everywhere. I'm just a little bit less obvious about it than Venger. Not that there's anything wrong with his approach, it's also good, but you'll see as we go through. This is a gonzo mixed settings. It's somewhat post-apocalyptic, it's somewhat fantasy, it's somewhat science fiction, somewhat science fantasy. I would put it in the same kind of territory as Carcosa, but not quite Gamma World. It's maybe a sort of more fantasy oriented Rifts even. It's a hex crawl without a hex map and a mega dungeon in terms of the Black Pyramid. So you've got information you need here about crossing the desert, survival considerations, unique hazards and so on. The book is littered with tables, which many people find useful for inspiration. It's something I'm trying to do more of in my own work, because I tend to find that the people that are buying my work lately tend to want that kind of random inspiration. And that can be something that I'm good at. It's nice to see Venger doing it. There's passages on various other bits of the setting that you can pad out yourself, though there is more detail later on. There's one obvious reference for you. But yeah, it's a real chaotic mix of ideas and influences, which is kind of Venger's bag, I guess. And this is why it's so hard to review, because Venger just throws so much stuff at you. Oops, there goes my monetization. He just throws so much stuff at you, just kind of vomits creativity onto the page. And despite the contents in the index, it's done in a fairly disorganized fashion, so it's almost a delirious trip trying to read the book. It's a flow of consciousness. Now, I've been mainlining a lot of Alan Moore lately, and in some of his works he tries to make the experience of reading akin to the experience you're supposed to be having, and some other authors and so on I've been reading about trying to do that as well. and the slight kind of disjointedness, the weirdness, the way that certain things kind of leap out of the page here and there, the way ideas just kind of oomph suddenly hit you. It is a delirious experience reading the book, and that really puts you in the mood of playing it. There's a couple of demo sessions on inappropriate characters as well, if you want to check that. Though I think Venger needs more sleep before he runs games. The artwork throughout is really good. He's definitely put the money in there, and the kind of the Metal Hurlant heavy metal magazine sort of influence is pretty obvious there. There's a few detailed locations and maps and so on. I'm not normally a fan of that, but so much of the material in here is reusable, and the tables are reusable, that it gives added value to things that I normally wouldn't particularly consider worthwhile. I don't tend to find adventures that helpful as a veteran games master. When you're a noob, it's great. If you're trying to establish a setting or the way you want a game to be played, it can be really good. That's kind of what he's doing here. And when I write adventures, I try to incorporate other material that's of use beyond that adventure, and Venger's definitely done that here. So there's another mini adventure within the corpse of a giant worm, because why not? I've been wanting to write an adventure set inside a creature. So there's this weird mixture of technology. So you've got post-apocalyptic tech, you've got future tech, you've got aliens. This is set within a larger sort of federation of worlds, so you can kind of tie it into other stuff that Venger's done or other games if you want. But it is this weird mix of science and fantasy and all the rest. There's a hell of a dungeon map for you. The Gamma Incel Canteen. Yeah, you can see what I mean, you know. And he hasn't called the spice melange; it's melange. It's always useful to have a bar to meet up and get together. Some photography. I don't know where he's got all of this art. Whether it's stock art. A lot of it seems to have been specifically commissioned. Random NPCs. See what I mean? It's just it's hard to review because there's just so much stuff, and it's kind of disordered despite the index and the contents. And the experience is in reading the book, right? It's trippy. It's constantly hitting you from different angles, and then that really evokes the setting, the experience of reading it. So I can't really review it in a comprehensive way because the experience of reading it is something ineffable and very weird. Yeah, dude, you're on acid. You should read Jolt. This artwork in particular jumped out at me. I don't know who the artist is, but it has that feel of 1970s horror or science fiction covers. The painted ones, sort of not Chris Foss, but that sort of era. So of all the artwork, I don't know why this one jumps out at me more than anything. That could be like a novel cover. Yeah, the Thing from the Mist or something like that. I'd write that book. So yeah, well, now we're into the Black Pyramid itself, which is this mega dungeon, and that takes up the kind of lion's share of the book, I guess. I don't want to spoiler it, but there's a whole bunch of stuff in there, and a nice chaotic and very artistic map. Maybe taking some cues from some of Zach Smith's work. Whatever you think or don't about Zach Smith, you've got to admit he elevated the form. Another weird... Look, an errant vagina. Like I said, there goes my monetization. And then there's weird things like this. See what I mean? It just comes at you out of left field with a bunch of animated fruit. And okay. Alright, dude. Fair enough. So you can't really review that without spoilering it. That's a rather nice orky or hobgoblin-y looking person. Yeah, it's just weird, disjointed, trippy, but there is a common thread through the whole thing, and I just can't can't review it properly because you really have to have the experience of reading through it to really get what it's like. One thing I noticed with Venger, right, is he loves throwing in sort of Cthulhu mythos descriptions, and when he's describing colours, he has a very feminine palette. So what I mean by that is a man would say red, reddish, right? A woman might describe wine red, or burgundy, or scarlet, or vermilion. It's an old meme, but it checks out, okay? I'm not being sexist, I'm referencing the meme. Venger will use more colour descriptions than you will typically find, like chartreuse, for example. And it is evocative. It does present the material in a better way. It is more descriptive. It is more evocative. So I may have to rip that off. It's like in War of the Worlds, I think the gases given off by the walkers is described as viridian. Now, I had no idea what viridian was, so I actually did go and look it up, and it's a bluish green and quite dark. If you look it up, it'll change your perception of the Martians. Trust me. I recognise that stock art. Okay, so he's using stock for some of it where it fits. Well, who doesn't? And as a seller of stock art, I approve. Clown Quarter, we'll skip right over that. It's the main dungeon is a reflection of the greater world, and which is a reflection of Venger's broader work, and it's kind of vivid, hallucinatory, strange. If that's what you want from your Gonzo old school, if you remember like the Barrier Peaks and things like that, then Venger's your guy. Or if you like, what's it called? The Cypher System weirdness game, Numenera. If you like Numenera, but you don't want anything quite as pretentious as Numenera can get, then I think Venger's products are for you. I mean, double spread, weird Cthulhu entities in tubes, yellow sign priest with cables coming out of his neck. There's your juxtaposition of weirdness. All right. More from that artist that I really liked. Venger, give me his name. I mean, you can't really review a Mega Dungeon without spoilering it, so let's just skip the rest of this unless anything leaps out at me. More by that artist. I do like that. I really like that. I did like the giant cat with the bosomy ladies earlier as well. That was a good piece. That could have been a heavy metal cover back in the day. More weirdness. Right, then we get to his afterword. No shout out for me. Ugh, Venger, you terrible person. Right, this also comes with rules. Now, these are the rules that Venger has been using in the couple of sessions that he's run on the Inappropriate Characters channel. This is his very, very slimmed down Crimson Dragon Slayer D20. You need some vague familiarity with some form of D&D, but then you'll get this. But it is a absolutely minimalist version of D&D. It can be, it's basically story time with the occasional roll. It's doable if you're of a more story gamer persuasion or a more telling stories persuasion, then it works. But I can see a lot of old school people not liking this, but there's nothing to stop you using your favourite old school rules or D&D 5th edition or whatever other fantasy game you prefer, Pathfinder. There's nothing stopping you using this, and I think you'll find a lot of inspiration and ideas from it for those games. Venger himself says that this is a game that is mostly about exploration and interaction, and so a lighter set of rules is more suitable for that, I think. If you want us to go full story game, I mean, I'm not going to recommend anything that's powered by the apocalypse because I just don't get on with it. But if you play Dungeon World, which is probably the best version of those rules, then you could probably adapt that to this very, very easily and quickly, and it would suit the kind of more narrative and exploration focused game that he's talking about. There's the index, and we're done. So, right, Jolt is, as I say, it's a book that kind of defies review, because it's the experience of reading the book and the ideas and inspirations that it throws up that is the main value in it. The dungeons, like most dungeons, aren't especially reusable, and while the main focus of the book is this mega dungeon, the Black Pyramid, Venger has put enough reusable elements into those dungeons that they have added value beyond the time that you play it. Now, when it comes to value, I think role-playing games are some of the best forms of value that you can get on the market. They're generally cheaper than those art books that I mentioned, and they're often these bigger hardbacks. They're often a visual feast, and that's certainly the case here. So you get the value of the art, like it's an art book. You get the value of reading. You get the value of inspiration, and then you get the value of playing. And if you just go to a cinema 2 or 3 times, right? That's what, at most, maybe 9 hours of entertainment, and you're going to get more than that just reading this a few times and taking inspiration from it and running a couple of sessions. So when it comes to value for money, I think role-playing games are definitely well up there. I don't know how much it's selling for. Ask Venger, or go and check out his website. If I remember, I'll put that in the link below, in the information below. But there you go. I think it's a good buy. There's certainly enough in there, and it's an experience reading it. But it defies proper review. Zang.